Everybody wants to put the latest trend and technology in their resume. I also want to put. But before trying to put any of these latest things in your resume, just for the sake of getting your resume picked for the interview, you must understand deeply what is that you are putting in your resume. If you are interviewed on that topic, will you be able to answer many things around that topic? One such topic is deep learning. Many of us in data science community try to put deep learning in their resume without actually understanding how it works, what are its implications, what is its real application, what are its limitations. In this video, I am going to walk you through the basic limitations of deep learning which you must be aware of, so that if you plan to include deep learning in your resume, or if you plan to talk about deep learning to someone, then these things you must keep in mind. Be it your business or be it your colleagues, if you want to discuss the deep learning implementation, these are the things you should keep in mind. Welcome to Unfold Data Science. My name is Aman and I am a data scientist. Let us start one by one. What are the limitations of deep learning, guys? What do you think? The very first limitation that comes to our mind is generalization of the model. Now let us try to understand what I mean by generalization of the model. Suppose you have 1 million images of cats and dogs. Okay? Now if you train your model on cats and dogs, 1 million images, and tomorrow will you be able to predict some animal which is very similar to cat and dog? Or will you be able to generalize your model to a larger animal group with little tweak? This is one very big challenge with deep learning models. Deep learning model by nature are not generalized, are not generalizable. So deep learning models you cannot generalize. For example, think of a self-driving car. Okay? In self-driving car, the learning will happen in such a way that if there is something which is this much of height and this much of width and this much of, these are the coordinates, nearby road with this much of distance, then that is a street light. That is how the learning will happen. Now imagine, can you generalize that in some other city where the height of the street lights are 3 times the general height on which the model is trained? This is the problem with deep learning models. The generalization is not that simple. If you train your model on some data, then it will kind of learn the pattern around that and it will expect the same kind of data for the prediction. So it is not very flexible. That is limitation number 1. What next? Limitation number 2 with deep learning model is, let us say in your data, you give out of 1 million records, you give 70% or 80% of cats and only 20% of dogs. Okay? Deep learning models typically by nature will be biased towards the majority class. It happens in machine learning as well. But why it will happen more in deep learning is, all of us know that deep learning needs more and more patterns, more and more data to learn. Now out of these two classes, if you give one class little less than other class, then what will happen is your model will learn too heavily from the majority class and too less from the minority class. What will happen? Your model will be biased towards the majority class. This is a very generic machine learning, deep learning problem, but it is very evident in case of deep learnings. Okay? So generalization and biased are two main problems of deep learning. The next problem with deep learning is, of course, all of us know that deep learning needs large amount of data and deep learning needs good amount of hardware support. If you do not have good amount of hardware support, or if you do not have huge amount of data, then learning will not make sense if it is a deep learning model. The meaning of deep learning model is you have to give sizable number of inputs or sizable number of sample to learn the pattern. Otherwise, the way algorithm is designed internally, it will not be able to learn the pattern from the data. So hardware and software requirements, that is another limitation you should keep in mind if you try to implement a deep learning model. Next one, what I am going to discuss is one of my most strong and favorite difference between ML and DL, or you can say limitation of DL. that I pay more focus on every time I think of a deep learning model, and that is nothing but model explainability. What is model explainability, guys? Suppose you implement an artificial neural network, deep learning model. Let us say you implement an LSTM model. Tomorrow your business asks you, this is good, you have implemented the model. Can you explain me step by step what is happening here statistically? Or can you explain me mathematically what is happening at every step? That is where you will not be able to explain. The reason being, you have very limited control on the algorithm. What control you have? You can just set few parameters when you call the model. When you call the model, you set few parameters and you expect model will do good on this data, which happens if your data has some patterns. If you have a good number of records, model does good, deep learning model will do good. But what about the explanation part? So explainability and your control on the model is very limited. What I mean by your control on the model? In logistic regression or linear regression, you have a lot of control on the model. Which variable is behaving how, which variable shall I take out, which variable shall I keep, what kind of, should I go for a different regression, lasso regression, ridge regression, should I do a outlier treatment in a different way so that my model will behave differently. All these things you can do when you have more control on the model and more control on the data. Here in deep learning scenario, once you submit your data and fix your parameters, you lose the control over the process, and that is where you do not know what is exactly input at every step, what is exactly output at every step. It is not like it is impossible to find. It is possible using mathematical equations, but it is not very easy to do. Okay, and explaining this to someone is really going to be difficult. Where deep learning models are good? Obviously, if you have huge number of data, if you want to escape the lot of feature engineering, if you have good hardware support, if you have humongous amount of data and you have some good amount of time on which you want to train a model and see how it is performing, obviously deep learning models are doing great, and these are gaining momentum in market. All of us know every day new algorithms are coming. But I wanted you to understand everything comes at a cost. So deep learning models has its limitations, has its disadvantages, and every time you think of implementing it, whether in a Kaggle competition or in a real project or anywhere, right? If you are discussing with your colleague, with your managers in your office, with your bosses, you should keep in mind these will be the limitations and I have to work with these limitations. So the purpose of creating this video is you must be aware that how to overcome these limitations, or when these things will come, then what will I do? Okay, so I hope you understood the concept of limitations of deep learning. Let me know what is going in your mind through comments. I'll see you all in the next video. Till then, stay safe and take care.